Corbolic V2. This is a super safe and effective natural anabolic. Not only is this product going to help you increase protein synthesis, which basically means muscle recovery and growth, it also may inhibit myostatin, which is a protein in your body that is known to inhibit muscle growth. This is a complete natural anabolic that works through multiple different pathways, has multiple trademarked ingredients. If you are a natural athlete looking for that edge, Corbolic V2 is what you need. Get yourself some.
All right, guys, welcome to the Pro Physique Code. Today, Lexi, Evan, myself, we're going to talk about boundaries in prep. Now, this means a lot of things. I think what's exciting for me is I heard Lexi discuss this topic and thought she meant something else. So I like the idea that we're going to discuss different boundaries and what that means for different people.
Yes, I think this is a good topic to hit on. I feel like we've definitely done an episode on boundaries in the past. It's been a while, but I feel like in the past when we did it, it was always a very popular, well-received topic because I mean, this applies to literally everybody, and it's not something that a lot of people like talk about. Sometimes it's not easy to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, boundaries aren't easy for a lot of people in any aspect of their life. If it's work boundaries, prep boundaries, any type of boundary. So I think it's a good topic to discuss. And even if we have talked about it before, it's something we could definitely reiterate and
Yep. One thing we do want to say is thank you for all the watchers and commenters on YouTube. So I want to ask a question for anybody on YouTube right now. We have sold out our Command the Stage event. In fact, we didn't even have the opportunity to open it up to the public. So comment below if you would be interested in going to an event that is with all of us, a couple other experts, potentially like Brett Contreras, Dr. Joe, and others. If we were to open it up to the public only, right? You know, obviously some of our clients may obviously get in as well, but we didn't really get to do that. So comment below, you know, if you'd like to go to see, like, train at, you know, the glute lab, you know, pose and discuss, you know, topics around prep with us. Because I'd like to consider doing a second event this year. So I'd like to get you guys feedback. And if not, let us know why. Say, you know, we're trying to keep the price under $500 for the whole weekend. You would still be, you know, responsible for your travel costs, stay costs, but that would cover everything from food, you know, and experiences, seminars, training, posing, all that.
Yeah, and to expand on that a little bit too, I mean, this is the time of year, not to say that if we did a public event, like it would be within a month or two, but like this is the time of year too where there are a lot of free seminar opportunities in a
Yep.
lot of different states. So like I encourage competitors listening, whether you have competed before or even if you haven't, a great way to immerse yourself in the community and just learn a little bit more about the sport. Go to seminars. Like I had a client who went to a seminar this past weekend. We were talking about it. She had an amazing time. And, you know, I think it's just a really good way to meet people in the community, learn. So like this is the time of year where you're going to generally see the most seminars happening just because there's, you know, not a lot of shows going on. So definitely keep your eyes peeled for local seminars in your area.
100%. It's often hard to find a person or even two in your gym that's involved in this. So, yeah, it'll definitely make you feel more normal.
Oh my God, Will, Paul, it's funny because I don't know if you remember, but oh gosh, this was probably like 6 years ago. I think this was the first time, no, this was like the second time I met you. But you had a seminar there was a gym, it was on Hillsborough, but I can't remember what it was called. Maybe Pride. Do you remember? No, not
Oh yeah,
Pride.
Pride. Was it with Lauren Conlon?
It was,
Yeah.
yes. It was. And it was like a long time ago. And I remember that was the first seminar I ever attended. And it was so fun. You guys had like, you spoke, Lauren spoke, we
Natalie
trained,
Matthews.
Natalie spoke, Paige Riley was there, I think.
Yep.
And I was just like, I found some of those pictures from that seminar the other day on my phone. And I'm like, oh my God, that's funny. Cause I think that was the first seminar I ever went to. And it was scary, like going to it. You know, I think for a lot of people going to seminars is kind of scary at the beginning, but then you get there and you realize the people in the room, like those are your people. Those are the people that get you better than anybody else will.
I hear that all the time from people that are now like very close people in my life, that the first time they came to those things, they were so nervous and they came alone. So what's funny is, like, whenever we host an event, I look for people that look like they don't are uncomfortable. And I go say, hey, I'm Paul. Like, you know, I just try to, like, you know, introduce people. And, you know, because that first day, that's like it's going to sound cheesy, but you know, I went back to school to get my master's degree in business administration, and we had this phrase for like, because each class I took in my master's program, you had to form a group, and the first phase of like getting anything done, it's called forming. And they had like it rhymed: forming, storming, norming, and performing, right? So you can't perform until you like form. And so that first
Mhm.
introductory period at an event like that or at a thing is you've just got to like make that connection, make a friend, and then you can start having conversations. And that's the storming part, is like, oh, now we can actually talk. Then you get normalized, then you actually start to perform. And these classes, it's funny, they were 6 weeks long, and I remember every class would be the same. First week, everyone's kind of shy and feeling themselves out. By week 6, our group was like a well-oiled machine. This person was good at this person was good at that. And so I find these events, what happens is the first day we meet up, everyone's kind of shy. And then by Sunday, they're like, I don't want to leave. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's yeah, I love seeing the friendships too, like being formed. Because actually, even for the upcoming Command the Stage, I know I have several clients that are in a group chat, and then there's a couple of other girls too. One is Steph's client. There's another girl, I don't know whose client she is, but they're like all in a group chat together right now talking. So they're all doing an Airbnb together. So that's kind of cool.
That's the
Awesome.
best. Yeah. And yeah, so it'll be really fun to get everybody together, and just, you know, every group is kind of different and unique in its own way. So yeah, so if you guys are interested, that's something I'd like to do. Maybe, you know, we talked about Texas because we've sold out every seminar we've done at that hidden gym. So maybe something this summer in Texas, but yeah, just comment below, you know, and a lot of it comes down to with the feedback we get. So if you see us, be like, hey, I have a gym, I have a location, you know, because that's a lot of it. Like, you know, we are like busy day to day with our coaching stuff. It's hard for me to like find a location. So if someone says, hey, we can do it here, that's literally how we figured out every seminar. It's like we've kind of
Yeah.
just put feelers out. So comment below. That'd be wonderful to hear from you guys. Um,
And obviously, most of the stuff we do is Florida based because that's where all of us are located.
it
So
helps
we
us
would
keep the
obviously meet in
cost
the
down.
city.
I'll be
Yeah.
honest. If we're going to do an event in Texas, you know, it's going to change things, because for the Florida event, we're all driving, right? Lana's flying in, Dr. Joe's flying in, but the most of us are staying. Um, you know, and you know, Lexi, you said about like friendships. So I just went to Marie and Nemothy's wedding a couple weeks
Mhm.
ago, and Kathy Seitz was in her wedding party. Um, Congratulations to both of them. Kathy actually also got married. Um, she eloped in Vegas, and Maria had a wedding over in New Smyrna Beach, really beautiful venue. But they met because of bodybuilding, because like, you know, I was coaching them both, and we were at a couple shows together, and they are like besties. They like travel
Mhm.
together. They do all these things together now. So, you know, that's what this sport really can do, is just introduce you to like-minded people.
For sure.
So, all right. So yeah, so Command the Stage sold out so quickly. I'd like to do another one. So again, just comment below, guys, if you're interested in these kind of things, and we'll kind of roll forward with that. But thank you guys for all the comments. We've really noticed that you guys have put in effort, and because depending on the platform, it's not always easy to leave a comment. So go on your phone.
Mhm.
If you're on your TV, it's a little bit harder. But let's talk a little bit about boundaries. Um, because Lexi, when you said the word boundaries, tell them what you meant.
So when I proposed this topic yesterday in our group chat, I kind of thought that we could talk a lot about boundaries within different relationships, like in your life, right? Significant others, maybe even kids, maybe your friend groups. I mean, I think specifically for a lot of my clients that I see that struggle with boundaries the most, it's like the younger group when, if you're in your 20s and you have friends that, generally they're not bodybuilders, maybe they are, but, they're going out every weekend partying. And I think having those boundaries with your friend groups, just the people in your life, I think is so important, because if you don't have those with people in your life and you try to prep, it's gonna probably make the prep so much more just stressful and not as enjoyable. Whereas like when you have those boundaries, it's almost kind of like it takes like a weight off of your shoulders when you have those boundaries, when you have that clear communication. So that's kind of where my mind went when I was thinking about boundaries. But Paul, explain kind of, and we're going to touch on both sides of these, but explain where your mind kind of went with it.
Yeah, so my thought with boundaries is the discussion that we have generally with a competitor when we have a consult, right? You know, I always talk about nutrition and training, but I also will talk about drug protocols, about, you know, what is their stance. And it's generally one of two things. I want to stay natural. I don't want to do anything, you know, I don't want to do performance enhancing drugs or anything like that, or, you know, very aggressive fat burners. Or they're like, hey, just tell me what I got to do to be the best I can be, right? And then if that's the result, then the question is, okay, how far are you willing to take it as a female? Because you can take it to the point where, you know, your voice changes, your muscularity becomes unquestionably enhanced, right? Like there's, you know, and that's great. Like if that's what you want to do, I'm all for it. It's not for me. I'm not that coach, but that's why it's important to find out like boundaries with regards to your nutrition, training, cardio, those kind of things. Um, because I think as a coach, if you don't have a moral compass, you will get into some very bad positions. You will put clients in very bad positions, potentially even the hospital, like or you know, long-term health issues. And I think to me, that's obviously a bad coach. If you put your client in a worse position than they were when you met them, that's a boundary that I'm not willing to go through, right? So yeah,
Sure.
I think it's good to talk about all kinds of boundaries. Is there another boundary that you thought of, Evan, like when
Yeah.
it came up?
Yeah, and when you brought it up right there too, like boundaries as a coach to your client too, like what are we willing to talk about and do with our client? Like if
Yeah.
a client comes to me and says, "Hey, I want to do this, 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 and this," there's been times I'll say, "Hey, I don't feel comfortable with that. I don't." I have boundaries when it comes to the PED side of things, things that I don't think are okay to do, and I think that's important to have that good moral compass around that. At
Yeah, the
least I do,
conversation
right? And
is
look, and here's the deal: there's coaches out there that'll do that stuff. It's just not me. That's just my boundary, right?
Yeah,
So
the conversation to me, the thing that I find is like, oh, people are talking more and more about stuff online. They're talking about their drug
mhm.
protocols. They're in the gym talking about what they're taking. So I get more messages than ever. Hey, coach, what do you think about this? Should I be taking this? And honestly, one of my biggest pet peeves is, hey, coach, so and so in my gym is doing this, so I started it without having a
Yeah,
conversation around it. And you know, that's the situation where I've had to let clients go and be like, hey, okay, that's fine, but I no longer feel like me putting you on stage as a representation of my coaching. So it's probably just the
yeah,
best fit to just move on, you know?
Yeah,
mhm.
So yeah, there's
absolutely.
lots of versions of boundaries. Um,
And I think too, another thing like to kind of stem off of what you were saying, Evan, is boundaries that like we have as coaches in terms of protocols and what we're willing to do or not willing to do, but also, boundaries like simple boundaries in terms too of like when clients can get a hold of us, right? I think all of us, we are very good at giving our clients space of like reaching out to us whenever they need it, right? We're not just like coaches who are like, you can only get a hold of me on your check-in day at this time. But also, there comes a point where, hey, if you're texting me at, I'm Eastern time, maybe you're Pacific time and you're texting me and it's like 10 p.m. at night, like, you know, maybe you can do that, but I'm not going to respond that night. I'll tell you that. So having those like communication boundaries and those time boundaries too, I think is important.
yeah. Well, let's take this in order so we can be very productive here. I think it'd be good if we each kind of went through our first prep
Okay.
and discussed like, because obviously your first prep things change drastically. And
Mhm.
those boundaries, like you said, relationships with family and friends, relationships with going out. How did we'll start with you, Lexi. How did your boundaries change? Because you were in college at the time, so
Yeah.
obviously, you know, you weren't going to skip class, or you know, like you had like, you know, you're not the party girl that was in college. You were, you know. So let's talk about your first prep and like, did you set boundaries with people, or were you just kind of already implied?
Yeah, so it was kind of interesting because like my first prep, I was living in a dorm. So I was very much so in like the thick of college life. And I knew right off the get-go I was not going to prep if it was going to compromise like my grades or my ability to be a student, because like my parents always instilled in me in college like you are a student first. That comes above everything. So I never felt like it really wreaked havoc in terms of like my grades or anything. If anything, I think it made me a better student because I was just more like productive with my time. But when it came to the social aspect of things, so this is probably going to sound weird, but I didn't really ever vocalize that I was in prep. Like you could probably tell as I got leaner. But like even my roommates, they were, gosh, one was trying to remember what their majors were. They were completely different majors than me. They were completely into like different things than I was, but they just like they accepted me for me. And I never actually inherently came out and was like, I'm in prep for a show. I'm, X weeks out. They knew I went to the gym every day. They knew my schedule. We had like dorm social events too. And like I would still go to those. I wouldn't go in and make a scene that like, oh, I'm in prep, I can't do this or that. Like I would still enjoy myself. Maybe I wasn't having the, whatever food and cocktails they were, mixing up and providing for us, but I just didn't really say anything that first prep. And I found that like for me, that really worked because then I wasn't looked at as like different, if that makes sense. And so that's kind of the approach that I took. And actually, I mean, I didn't live at home at the time, but my parents, they didn't really know much about it either. I think I talked a little bit about the fact that I was going to be doing a show like with my mom and my dad, and they knew a little bit about it, but it wasn't something that like was the bane of my existence. And that worked really well for me at the time, just taking that approach. Not to say that that's the like only right thing to do, but that just helped me to not feel like everybody would like think of me differently because like, oh, Lexi's in contest prep, we can't ask her to come out with us or we can't ask her to hang out with us or things like that.
Yeah, mine was kind of very opposite of that. I was in my go out. I was like, I think I was trying to remember the I think it was 34 when I was prepping for my first show, and I was in the thick of my going out and having a good time phase. So I told everyone that I was doing a show, and I did that for two reasons. I did it number one, so people would stop asking me to go out and do things, and number two, so to put that extra pressure on myself because it was going to be one of two things was going to happen. Either I was going to tell everybody I was going to do it and I backed out on my word, or I was going to do what I need to do and get on stage and look good. And so for that, it's the approach that I used for that. And people knew very quickly, no, he's not going to go out. He's not going to take part in this. He's not going to be a part of this stuff right now. And they all supported it because they were friends. They were friends, right? But I was very firm with that, saying, hey guys, like I need support in this right now. This is what I'm doing. This is my goal. And here's why I'm doing this. And like good friends should do, they all supported that and didn't try to pressure me or anything else around that line. So I was very, very firm though. It was I think that is important too, especially depending on the type of groups of friends that you have. If you have friends that kind of like, well, it's okay, just and with family too, right? It's okay, just one little bite of this, or hey, just this it won't hurt you. Then you need to be very firm with those people up front.
You said something there a second ago, Evan, that I think is important to kind of expand on really quickly about the fact that, like, your friends, they will support you. If you're doing something that they know genuinely makes you happy, they should
Mm.
support you. I hear all the time friends and family while prepping, like maybe they're very negative towards you prepping. And at the end of the day, like true friends, people that love you, they want to see you happy. If bodybuilding
Mhm.
makes you happy, they should support that. And if they don't, you know what? Maybe they really aren't true friends that have your best interest at heart. Just a thought.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lexi, you said a couple things that I thought were awesome because they really reminded me of my first prep. So my first prep was a lot like Evan's. I was 32. I had decided a year in advance I was going to do a show. I went to a show and said, I'm going to do this show next year. I hired my coach. I started putting in the work. I had already been training for 15, 16 years or something, but like the diet and, learning how to track macros, all that stuff was so new. But the boundary I set was probably twofold. In my building phase, um, I did not miss a workout. I think a lot of people think of like the diet and all this stuff. Going to the gym 5 days, 4 days, 6 days a week consistently and going in with the right mindset and putting in the work every time you train is not something many people do, right? A lot of people go to the gym a lot, but they don't go to the gym a lot with a purpose, with a focus. And that's when I hired a coach, that's the first thing I remember. I remember being like, wow, I got a plan to follow. So what did that mean for me at that time? That meant like, oh, it's Friday night. All my friends want to go meet up for a drink, but I got to work till 5 and then I got to come home and have my pre-workout meal because that workout is my priority. And what's funny is I would go to the gym, I would come home, get cleaned up, and I would go meet them at 8 or 9 o'clock on Friday night. They'd already be 3 sheets to the wind. But I kept my promise to myself. So that was that first boundary. I was like, hey guys, I'm not going to see you right at happy hour. I'm going to go do my thing. Um, and I remember at first they were like, haha, Paul's a bodybuilder. He's too skinny. You're not a bodybuilder. You know, like it was almost like they joked with me. But after a few months, it was like, they were like, wow, you're actually doing it. Like, good for you, man. Like, it's really cool that you said you were going to do something and you did it. So it almost like built like I got some like, I don't know, good mojo out of it. I was like, wow, okay.
Yeah.
So now, they're seeing that I'm actually putting in the work. The other one for me was I had to stop doing a lot of other shit. Like I was literally like playing softball 2 nights a week, volleyball 1 night a week, basketball. I'd say yes to golf. Like there was literally no thing I would say no to if it meant I could go play a sport. I'm a sports junkie. I love sports. So I literally just pulled back on all of that stuff. I probably stopped playing softball completely altogether. I was a college baseball player, so the softball was just a fun transition for me. But I also realized like, what's the point of this? It doesn't make me as happy as like bodybuilding did. So for me, the boundaries were make sure I'm putting in the effort. Like if I say I want to do a bodybuilding show, fucking act like it.
Yeah.
Hmm.
That was the boundary I set. That was prior to prep starting. And when prep starts, it was a completely different set of guidelines. But the one thing I remember, Lexi, like you said, you became like it didn't impact you negatively in college. I couldn't have done it in college because my social life was my priority. But
Hmm.
when I became my priority, I remember like that I call it time management because I had to remember to go to the gym. I had to get my meal prep in. I became a better employee at work. You
Yeah.
know, like I had my meals prepped for the day. I got to work on time. You know, like I became a better employee. I actually got multiple promotions over my first prep. I went back to school. You know, like I just felt like a more efficient human being. I was
Yeah.
like, I'm getting more done. People think, oh, I don't have time to track my calories and meal prep. No, you actually save time doing that. You save money and save time. People are like, isn't bodybuilding expensive? I'm like, aren't you going to eat? Yeah. Aren't you going to go to the gym? Then where's the expense?
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah. And it's funny because I think back to when I prepped when I was in college, like in that dorm, and I did not have like my dorm was not one of those fancy like apartment dorms. It was literally like I didn't have a kitchen. I had my own mini fridge and microwave like under my bed. I had that, but we had one community kitchen for our whole like dorm hall. And I remember like having to go down, like I would go there twice a week usually, and prep like my meat and all that for the week. And the kitchen was just it was like there were people in there sometimes. It was messy, it was gross, but like it was important to me, and I made it happen. I did it sometimes very late at night. But it is funny too because like my roommates, even though they were not into fitness at all, I did notice that towards the end of our time living together, they were kind of starting to go to the gym themselves. Like they would go to like these little fitness classes that the campus would put on. And just because, they knew I went to the gym, it kind of like rubbed off on them a little bit in a good way. Not that like I forced them to do that, but it's kind of cool how they started to like take an interest to bettering themselves too at the end.
Yeah.
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 We talk about the money aspect of it too. If you're a social person and you go out to eat and you go out and have drinks and you go out and do things a good amount of time with a group of people, you will save money in prep. You absolutely will save money.
My first prep, I remember, Evan, that was the first time in my life that consistently my bank account went up every month.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, hey, the drinking, I realized I was spending, $300-400 a weekend on going out, having a drink,
Mhm.
you know, and then also people think about like, oh, isn't it expensive because of food? No, like a meal, a prepped meal is going to cost you $2 to $3 to make yourself versus like $12 to $15 if you go out to eat. So it starts to add up quickly when you stop spending, these like, 30, 40, $50 like tabs everywhere. So yeah, I definitely noticed that too. I remember at the end of my prep being like, man, my bank account's a lot higher than it was when I started
Mhm.
prep.
Yeah.
And I think so, to share a story too, because I think we all deal with people sometimes in our prep journeys that just like people that are very close to us too, that like just don't support it or they are very negative towards it. And a good example of that in my life is my mom, actually. And like her and I joke about it all the time, but she, when I first started competing, was like she hated it. Like she hated the thought of it. She was convinced that I had like issues. She was very negative towards
Well,
it. And
doesn't your sister have some issues? So maybe there was some
yeah,
like
but that
history there that,
But that was before. So that was before.
Okay.
So my sister does, yeah, she does have an eating disorder. And, but this was before she was diagnosed with
Okay.
that. So my mom at the time I think she was convinced I had an eating disorder, even though like I was eating so much food. I was really lean, but, she thought that's basically what my issue was. And so I remember, when I moved home after that first year of college, she like set up all these doctor's appointments with me with the diet, like also with the dietitian. And it was a really big driver in our relationship, like, or a really big wedge in our relationship for a while. And after that, like, I kind of just thought, "Ugh, I'm never going to compete again because, like, I cannot put up with my mom doing this again." And that's honestly at that time, I just thought I'd never compete again. I was still going to live the lifestyle, but, and then I remember when a couple years later, flash forward, when I decided I did want to compete again, I was so worried to tell my mom. Not that, I had to tell her, I was an adult, but I was just so worried. But what I found is like my mom, she's now been to, I think, two of my shows. She understands it a lot more because I have sat down and explained to her the process of competing, what it looks like. Like, yes, I am getting really lean for a show, but it's not out of a place of me trying to restrict, it's not that I have an eating disorder. Like I'm getting lean and I'm going to stay that way very temporarily. And then she understands the other side of it where, hey, I'm adding weight to build to improve into my next show, right? So she really understands it a lot more now. And I'll be honest, she's one of my biggest supporters now. She is not a bodybuilder herself, nor will she ever be, but like I've taken time to explain things to her. When she came to the Republic of Texas in 2023, she loved it. Like she had so much fun, and she understands it a lot more. Therefore, she supports me and she knows, like, she trusts that I know what I'm doing. She knows that's not like a negative thing anymore, just because I've taken the time to take her to shows and also explain, what goes into the sport, because I think a lot of people have this stereotype of bodybuilding, right? And they think it's very negative, but sometimes as the athlete, like, you need to take the initiative to sit down and explain things a little bit to people in your life so that they understand it a little bit better.
Well said. Well said. I think
Completely agree.
the weirdest thing for people in our lives is when they hear the word bodybuilding. We all, before we did a bodybuilding show, had a preconceived notion what that meant, mostly associated with dangerous things like very strict diets, which can and do cause harm. I mean, it's still very common. So if someone I know is like, hey, I'm doing a bodybuilding show, I'm immediate like, okay, well, what's your approach? I have very close friends of mine that have worked with, before I was the coach I am today, would be like, oh, I'm working with this person and I would hear their approach and I'd be like, that sounds terrible. Right. And so most of those people are in and out of the sport rather quickly, because they go, oh, I just can't handle that diet or I can't handle that approach. So I get it when people, it makes sense. You should ask questions of your friends. You should try to figure out if they're doing things in a dangerous manner. But we also, as competitors, accept that it's going to be hard, and we kind of trust the people in the position to coach us, and sometimes to the detriment of ourselves. And so
Yeah.
I think it makes sense that the people around us are going to have concern if they care about us. But going to a show, it's a great way to remove that kind of uncertainty, because just hearing the word "I'm competing in a bikini competition," you're like, well, what is that, right? But when you see, and I've been there with many dads of my clients that are like, wow, this is amazing. Like, I see what their judges are doing now. They're bodybuilders, it's just they are wearing a bikini, so it's like, but I think it makes sense. And this is where you as a athlete have to help the people around you. You have to, include them in the journey. You said something, Evan, that was very powerful. Like, when you tell your friends around you, they start to root for you. Like, I remember one time I was drinking like a Diet Coke and my buddy's like, hey, you shouldn't be drinking that. And I was like, no, it's okay. It's 0 calories, right? Like, but in his mind, I'm supposed to be, eating broccoli and boiled chicken. That's bodybuilding,
Yeah.
so it's kind of fun to dispel that rumor as well. But
Yeah.
the boundary setting with the people in our lives is huge. And we haven't talked about this yet, but let's talk a little bit about relationships, significant others. Um, I don't know, Lexi, to my knowledge, have you been in a relationship while you've done a bodybuilding show?
Not in prep, no.
Okay. What about you, Evan?
Yes, multiple.
Yeah.
Yes.
So let's talk about
I
that.
have a bunch of different situations when it comes to that. Not,
Yeah.
they're all
Well,
not
I mean, let's
created
talk
equally
about
for
maybe
sure.
give an example of like a good example. Like, okay, we set this example, this is boundary and it went well. And maybe another one where like, you know, it didn't go as well.
Yeah. I was in a long-term relationship to where we were both competitors and actually I think all the relationships I've been, we've been competitors. And a lot of times it can be really, really good, really, really healthy. You can get there, you can support each other, you can be there for each other, and it can be an awesome, awesome thing. Um, then there's other times I've been into it to where it wasn't the best situation. Some people don't handle prep as well as others, right? And especially if you're prepping with somebody at that same point, things can get a little bit difficult. I think my situation was fine with it because I am a coach and because I prep so many shows, I understand when people start acting a certain way that it's a diet, it's and I don't take it personal with it, and I can try to help guide them a little bit too. And to be honest with you, you call it white knighting, you can call it whatever you want with it, but um, this last prep that I did, if the other my partner was struggling at that time with it and going through some things, then it was easy for me to not think about myself and how hungry and tired I was because I had to put my focus somewhere else with that and try to help them. I don't think that's probably the healthiest way to do things. And I'm in a position to where I've done so many shows that I can do that. But if you're a newer competitor, that's definitely a difficult thing. Um, so I think there definitely is a different dynamic if you're in a relationship with somebody who does shows and understands it compared to somebody who doesn't understand it. If somebody doesn't understand it, there will be a little bit of a learning curve that goes along with it. Something I always go over and talk about is, hey, if the last few weeks here I get tired or I'm a little bit shorter, like call me out on it, tell me, I'll do my
Hmm.
best to fix it, because I probably don't notice it. And it's not personal. I'm just exhausted. I'm just exhausted. And getting that across, I think, is really, really helpful. And a lot of people too. I mean, especially for guys, like your sex drive goes down to almost nothing, like nothing towards the end of preps. And making sure that your partner understands that, I think, is really important. And because if they don't, if they've never been lean like that, they don't understand it. And especially like as a guy, right? Like as a guy, you're supposed to be always ready to roll. But I don't know any guy towards the end of prep that has a has that desire.
You know, you hear what's
They're
funny,
exhausted.
Evan. You know, because you talk about the desire and all that stuff, and I have very specific memories of thinking like, yeah, I can't wait to, get some action tonight. And then tonight comes and you're like, fuck.
Fuck
So it's
that.
almost like it's, the extreme, like you got to almost learn your body's like
Hmm.
rhythms and prep. Because yeah,
Yeah.
it's energy is so hard to come by,
Yeah.
especially when you get stage lean. And that's something that you can communicate with your partner because I think you can start to feel like, they might feel like, oh, your feelings have changed or you're not as connected. And I think that's just a temporary thing. And as long as you
Yeah.
communicate that, it's not a problem. And listen, I don't know anybody that's been in a long-term relationships that's continued to have the same sex drive from day one to day, 10,000. So there are normal ebbs and flows, and it can be a healthy part of that as well.
Yeah. And look, I'm trying to get into super specifics about things because I know people know
Yeah.
the people I've been in relationships with stuff. I can tell you that it is not always easy. And be patient with each other. And that goes both ways on there. And you have to understand if you expect them to be patient with you while you're tired and you need things, then you need to be patient with them if they don't understand it or they get a little bothered, if they get a little upset with it. Like you have to, patience goes both ways, people. It's
Yeah.
not just all is me. In bodybuilding shows, we get so focused on ourselves that we forget the other people around us. And we forget that this is a choice to be in this. And that's something, the more that you do this, I think there's a few factors. The longer you do it, the more you understand it, and the better relationship that you have with food in your body and what your goals and what your why is, the easier things get the longer you do it. If you go into bodybuilding preps and you do not have a good relationship with food, and I'm not saying eating disorder levels, but just not the best relationship with food. And let's face it, a lot of people do not have the best relationship with food. Competitors are not, like a ton of people. And so just because you don't have the healthiest relationship with food, I don't think it disqualifies you from being able to do a show. with that. But it's about knowing that and managing it. And the better relationship you have with food, the better that prep will end up being for both parties involved.
I think something else too, like when it comes to keeping relationships like strong and healthy is being able to, I mean, and this is just not even in prep, this is just like in life in general, is being able to remove yourself in certain situations when, I think prep is a great example. We all know we have days where you're irritable, you're tired, you
Mhm.
just want to snap. Like it doesn't matter what somebody says. They could say the smallest little thing and you just snap at them, right? So being able to identify when you're in one of those moods to maybe remove yourself from the situation. Don't be afraid to tell your significant other or somebody that, you're around, like, hey, I just need to take some time for myself right now. I'm, and get a little bit more level headed and focused. I don't want to potentially, deflect anything on you. But I think that's a smart, skill to have, to be able to remove yourself from those situations when you do feel like, hey, you may just crack or snap, depending on just the smallest thing somebody says.
Yeah, and there's levels of snapping too, people. Like it is not okay to snap at your partner under any form. I don't care if you're diet or you're tired or what. It's not
Yep.
okay to do that. And so there's no excuse. I'm tired is not an excuse for that. It's not. And I remember my first after I finished my first prep with my ex fiance, I remember she looked at me at a prep. She's like, "You can't be like that again. Like I was there to support you, but you can't be like that again." And I looked at her. I said, "Okay, I won't be." And I made that decision, and I realized I was being a little whiny bitch
Mhm.
and complaining about every single thing there was to complain about. I did, and I can imagine that was very, very off-putting. I completely get that. So I made a very conscious effort for the next 4 years we were together to anytime we did a show, if I was feeling a little bit down, I would preface that, just like you said, Lexi, and I would say, hey, like, I'm just really, really tired tonight. So if I'm not like responsive or anything, please just know it's not you. I love you and I care about you very much. And prefacing that up front with things. Did it always make everything better? No. But I don't remember one time I ever raised my voice or snapped or anything. Because guys, like this is a conscious choice to do a show with
Yeah.
that.
It
It
It's a
should
is.
enhance
conscious
your life.
choice.
It should enhance your
Yes.
life. And anyone that says like, oh, bodybuilding, it's bad. No, like anything that we do in life that is going to be challenging, it's going to have challenges. If you're going to try to better yourself or, follow your passion, there are always going to be challenges along the way, so sometimes that's what people, oh, I don't know, bodybuilding, it just seems like it's so it's yeah, it's difficult for you because you don't want to do it. I
Mhm.
freaking love it. I love the process.
Yeah.
I love, honestly, I've said it many times, getting on stage for me is, it's fun, but it's not the point of prep. Literally, like couple days before the show is when I actually go, oof, I did it. Like that's when
Yep.
I feel accomplished. Getting on stage is almost like, ugh, I got to put the makeup on and the tan and that's not necessarily the part that I'm like, I can't wait for. And honestly, you put your friends out on show day. They want to come support you. And almost, I think last time I competed, I only told a couple people because I'm like, I don't want everyone to feel like obligated to come sit there and,
I've
hang
always
out.
felt that way too. I remember even growing up, like I remember in gymnastics meets, I'd have like people that would want to come, like even teachers. I just like, and I've always felt bad, but I just didn't really want that attention. It puts a little bit of a layer of added stress on your plate on show day. I forget what I was going to say after that, but that was my thought to what you said, Paul.
Yep.
And here's also the thing. I know everyone said this, but everyone should say it in every podcast and every post when they talk about relationships and bodybuilding shows. If your relationship is not in a good place before you start a prep, it is not going to be in a better place by the end of it. It's not going to be. There has to be understanding, and you need to be in a good place going into it.
Absolutely. And to kind of also give, I think this is a really cute example because this literally happened yesterday. So I had a client posing session and one of my longtime clients, and we're doing her first bodybuilding prep. And it just so happened that on the Zoom, her husband was in the background and he like came in. He's like, I just have to tell you something really quickly. So he comes in and he was like, I just have to say how proud I am of, he said his wife's name and he's like, I'm just so proud of her. He's not a bodybuilder, but he's like, I am so proud. I've never seen her so like I've never seen her love something as much as she loves bodybuilding, and I'm just so proud of her. And I thought that was so cool because we don't oftentimes hear of those stories of like significant others who are not bodybuilders just being so supportive like that. But that was really cute and that made my day yesterday.
All right, let's move into some other areas. So one thing that I have experienced that you guys haven't yet is children. Because I prepped at 32 before I had kids, and I prepped at 38 after my first son was born. I did a show in 2023 with 3 kids. So some boundaries I set, just as a rule for myself, was that if my children offer me food, I take it and I eat it. Right now, it's not as if they're shoving food in my face all the time, but I'd made the decision that I never want my kids to see me eating a certain way and think, oh, this is good or this is bad. And for those of you that aren't familiar with my philosophies, there are no bad foods. Okay, foods that are edible have a purpose. Some people will say, well, like, oh, there's no value to cake. Fuck that. It's delicious. I like cake. Okay. So like, like it's culturally, it's, it's a part of our lives to like make food together and eat food together and enjoy things and sit down and be like, oh, how good does this taste? Great. That's value, right? Does it mean it's the most valuable thing for us to eat for putting on muscle and losing body fat? Maybe not, but that's not the point of life. And so I'd never want to pass on any type of behavior to those around me, where I'd never want my child to say like, oh, that's bad for me. In fact, I've actually had my oldest son has come home and said to me like, oh, something I was eating, oh, is that healthy? And I immediately was like, where did you hear that? Who said it wasn't healthy? Right? I wanted to know. I wanted to get to the root of it, and immediately say, no, everything is healthy. If you can eat it and digest it, it is healthy. Like I honestly hate that word healthy. So my boundary was, because it's all about the amount you consume, right? Is it healthy to eat a pound of sugar? No, but is it healthy to eat some sugar? Sure. And so I always wanted to set that boundary with myself and with them, that almost like you said, Lexi, like they don't even know I'm in prep. To them, there's no difference. They don't pay attention to what I eat.
Mhm.
If I make a big deal out of it, yeah. If I'm like, oh, you shouldn't eat Oreos, those are bad for you. And I'll finish with this. I've had a lot of parents and their kids over the house over the years who are, for their own reasons, and I'm not judging that, they are almost orthorexic. Oh, don't eat this, it has this in it. And their children behave that way. And when they come to our house, where I have fruit and nuts on the same shelf as I have like granola bars and Oreos. There's no, like, my kids will choose a banana at the same, sometimes they just want a bagel versus, a cookie. Like, so, but what happens is when those individuals or those kids that have been like told, you can't have this, you can't have this, you can't have this, and then they have access to it, I've gone in my pantry and an entire thing of Oreos was gone. And I'm like, well, where'd the Oreos go? And I found out like these kids were just stuffing their faces because they're never allowed to have them. And then I'm like,
It's
oh, I
like
have to put them away.
yeah.
Yeah, like I'm not trying to like get in trouble with the parents. So I'm like, oh, I have to put these away when you're here. Um, Whereas, so that's my own personal boundary, is that I will not create eating disorder or orthorexic behaviors around my kids in prep.
And that's like the whole like preacher's daughter analogy, right? It's like if you're
Yeah.
everything's off limit, when you kind of get set free, watch out, sort of thing. Um,
Right.
and and what is healthy, right? Like
Right.
that's the word. Like a lot of times foods that technically are not the best for us, like a bunch of highly processed stuff with everything in the world tossed into it, maybe not the best healthy for us, but if it can bring us together, if it can help feel a bit better mentally, if it's something you're craving, you shouldn't eat it 24/7, 365. That's not healthy. But a little something here and there is not going to kill you. It is not. It is absolutely not. It's
Yeah.
absolutely not. It's just going into things with an open mind and understanding it, right? That there's a reason for certain things at certain times. And food does bring people together. It does. It is a social
There's nothing
thing.
wrong in my mind with eating something for one reason, and that only reason being it's freaking delicious.
Right.
Yeah.
That's like we are the weirdos. The bodybuilders are the weirdos that say like, "Oh, you shouldn't eat this food. It's not healthy." There's a whole world out there of people that their only joy in life is making delicious foods and opening restaurants and doing these. Like, is that wrong? No, it's not wrong. So yeah, I'm never going to be a judgmental dieter. In fact, if my client checks in and says, "Hey, coach, is it okay if I eat this?" I can't imagine a scenario where I'm like, late in prep, listen, we got goals there. I call it the funnel. At the
Mhm.
beginning of prep, you can include more things. By the end of prep, we've all talked about this. We're eating the same 8 or 9 foods. And it's not because I told myself that's all I'm allowed to eat. It's because I love the consistency and I'm actually at the point where I'm challenging myself. But just knowing if I want something, I can include it, I think changes my approach. I've never done a show where I had a hotel room or a house full of treats for when the show is over. To me, if that's how your prep is, bad news bears. I'm very
Yep.
worried for you. Very worried.
Oh,
Yep.
yes.
And I've been in situations like that with an ex that had 150 like cookie or cookies probably
Right.
stacked up
Whoa.
in the freezer. Yeah. And trust me, like I'm the person that's if it's around two, it's very tempting.
Yeah.
And that's incredibly difficult for me.
Listen, I only buy two
Incredibly
pints of ice
difficult.
cream at a time. I know.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Do we want to talk a little bit about now kind of the boundary setting in terms of like as coaches and kind of give our
Yes.
perspective there with protocols and then just also just coaches and our communication and that side of things? Because I think people would probably be interested to hear about that side of things too.
Yeah. And now this is something that I think, so let's talk about coaching, coach client relationship. I think, because we talk about this quite a bit. Um, because I still hear about it. I always thought, like, as a coach 10 years ago, okay, that stuff's going to be gone. But I still have consultations as recently as last week where people are like, yeah, I've been with my coach, but I don't get a reply for sometimes 4 days, sometimes a week. I'm on show day. They were unavailable. They, sent a plan and I never heard from them. So I didn't eat all day. You hear these stories, which I would call horror stories.
Yeah.
I've even been backstage at shows and seen a girl crying and I'm like, hey, is there something I can help with? And they're just like, no, my coach won't answer the phone. I don't know what to do. Like, so I think the boundary for me as a coach over the years has become, I want to reply to the update on the same day, unless I'm on vacation. Like I went skiing this weekend. I did not look at my phone Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. Um, but I've also now set the expectation that my updates are not on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Why? Because I'm always traveling and always at shows. So I made that correction, so people didn't have to wait. That's something you got to discuss in your call. Like you got to have that conversation. Also, what what is the expectation from the update? Is it good job with a thumbs up and you keep going? Or, like we as a company, we send weekly videos. Like I feel like it's very valuable to at least have an audio or a video discussion when necessary, which for me is most updates. Um, so yeah, like that boundary for me is um, I want to provide, I want to over provide what anyone else is doing in the industry.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I agree with that. It's about setting expectations initially on that first initial call. When I send over information, I tell them when they can expect it, and it's open communication. It's like, hey, if you have not received your plan and it's been a day or two and you want an update, reach out to me and let me know. And I also let them know when I typically do my plans and why I do it the way I do it. And when you explain things like that to people, it makes complete sense, right? And they understand it and everything's set and everyone's happy. Same thing, yeah. It's expecting replies. I've heard the same thing, Paul. Like it takes my coach, 3 to get back to me. When they do, it's either a short response or it's demotivating or whatever the case may be with it. And it's it's difficult for an athlete to stay motivated at that time. I had a conversation with a girl the other day about that. She's like, "This is just so unmotivating and demotivating. It makes me not want to do this." And if you're a coach and you are taking that motivation away from an athlete, that's not a good thing. But the onus also falls on the athlete too to make sure they're communicating that with the coach too. Make sure you're informing them of that. You shouldn't have to in a situation to where, a coach gives a jackass response and then it takes them 4 days to get you that jackass response, right? Like you shouldn't have to communicate, hey, can you not be an asshole and please get back to me quicker? That shouldn't be a conversation you have to
Right.
have, unfortunately, but there's a lot that you have to. Um, so yeah, it's that, and then how we communicate and setting boundaries with that, right? Like I do a lot of training critiques to my clients now, a lot of them, and I had to set new boundaries with that, saying, hey, you can't just send these whenever you want them to. Like send these on your check-in day along with your check-in response. Then I can do
Yeah.
it all at the same time because it was
Yep.
getting so overwhelming. I looked at my phone, I have 79 text messages, and I'm like, where in the world did all these come from? Right.
Yeah.
So, because there's no good way to email videos, right? So some things still have to be done over the
So
phone, some
something
by
I had to learn
email.
to do, Evan, because this is where I think we as coaches can allow ourselves, because we want to be there for every
Mhm.
person we work with, we can allow ourselves to get a little bit overwhelmed at times. And so what I have them do now is send videos via WhatsApp, right? So
Yep.
that
That's
way
what I've been doing.
I'm not always looking at WhatsApp, right?
Yep.
Text message to me is always open. I got kids. I can't just shut off. So I try to keep work stuff to work platforms.
Yep.
Um, Lexi, you said something about, hey, I know your check-in day is Tuesday, but if you send a check-in at 8 p.m., there's a
Yeah.
good chance you're not getting a reply till tomorrow. And most, I'd say 99.9% of people are okay with that, right? So
Yeah.
like just
Yeah.
setting that expectation.
And I think too, like, not that I explicitly come out and it's not like the first thing I say on consult calls, but a lot of times, at least when a client signs up and I'm sending them, their initial starting documents, I always attach like a full on intro video walking them through everything. And I always try to give them a little bit of a sense of like what my workflow looks like in terms of what days I'm doing check-in days on. And I think, an important part of being a client too is making sure that you are checking in on your check-in day because,
Yeah.
it may sound silly to say, but like, for example, most weeks it's not the end of the world. Like if I have a client who checks in a day late, like I can still get to it. It adds, it's probably going to add, a little bit of an extra layer of stress the next day. Cause a lot of times I have my check-ins very spaced out throughout the week for a reason, but it's also like some weeks, if I'm traveling or, for, let's just say at the end of this month, going to the Arnold, I may structure, my check-ins a little bit differently one week because I'm traveling. So it's like, as a client, if you're just checking in whenever it's convenient for you, even if that's not on your check-in day, that may not seem like a big issue because you're like, oh, I'm still getting it in. But, as coaches, we have certain workflows for a reason. And it's so we can be as efficient as coaches, but also
Mhm.
give you guys as a client the dedicated attention that you deserve. So that's another thing I think is important is just, having your check-in day and trying to always be diligent with sending your check-in on that day. And hey, I get it. We're all human. Things come up. But like if, for example, you can't check in on your check-in day, reach out to your coach ahead of time. Let
Yeah.
them know, hey, you know what? This came up. I'm generally very flexible. My clients say, hey, I'm sick, or hey, just got back from my work trip really late last night. Can I check in, tomorrow instead of today? Like I'm very flexible with those things, but I think it is important to, have that clear level of communication too, and those boundaries as a coach in terms of like when clients can check in, when they can reach you. And it comes down to, it allows us to be better coaches at the end of the day. It's not us being rude or, not us wanting to not hear from you. It just allows us to have a more efficient and better workflow.
One of
Yeah.
the
And
things I've been setting boundaries with myself, with my clients, is when they send an update. And so for those that aren't familiar, our update system is custom to us. Like we have a developer that has built it specific to our needs. If someone doesn't put some information in there, for example, if they're just checking their weight once a week and I don't get an average, or if they're consistently not putting in their cardio sessions or their intensity, or they're not putting in their correct macros, I'm like, hey, this is data that I need. This is how I do my job. This is the way my brain works. And then likewise, we have these wellness scores. And so sometimes they'll just leave them blank. And I'm like, I need to know how your sleep is, how your hunger is, how your stress. I need to know these things because, if every time you turn in an update, I have to reach back out to you and say, hey, why aren't you filling this out? That can become problematic. So I try to, you know, in the introductory call and introductory videos, say like, hey, this is why this is important. And I think that really helps. They're,
it
oh,
does.
I didn't realize what that was for. Okay, I'll start doing it. Um, so that really just helps when you set the boundaries with what the client expectations are, because I think as a client, I remember, my first coach, I wanted to like, what do you need? What do you need from me to be the best I can be? And so I think that's if you can explain that, it does really help.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And
Oh, go for it, Evan.
I'm speaking for myself, and I know I can speak for all of us here. The reason we have processes is so we can be the best coaches possible for you. I've never got a piece of feedback from any client I've ever worked with that says they feel like a number or they did not get the attention they deserved. And that's because I have processes set up. Before I did this, I was in national sales for large companies. So I traveled all over the country and I know how to structure a day and I know how to run a business. So when you do that and you bring it into coaching, it makes things run better. So like one of my things is I have my cutoffs at noon Eastern. Do I get to all my check-ins for noon Eastern? No, but it lets me know how many I have for the day, and I can structure my day and I can spread things out and make sure everybody gets the attention they deserve with that. And
Mhm.
that's the reason I do things the way I do them. Same thing. Every plan I send over, I do an introductory video that goes with it. I go over
Yeah.
everything, why it's important, why we do things the way we do them, why I need pictures taken a certain way, and explain the why behind it. And I do
Absolutely.
my best to explain that. And it's if the boundaries I set is so number one, I can be the good coach for you. And number two, not to compare everything. So like this isn't the best comparison, but like think about it like a dog. Like a happy dog has boundaries and rules, and they know what to expect, right? And they handle themselves very well. Not that a client's like an animal or anything like that, but you can understand it. Anytime you have boundaries and rules that are to benefit the clients and not us, right? It's to be actually it's to benefit both of us when it comes to that.
Yeah.
But it's for no other reason other than I want you, the client, to be happy. That's it. And I know based on me and my personality, the best way to make that happen.
Yep.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the pictures is a big one too. Like, I'm very much so, like you said, Paul, like, I'm a big stickler too with information and check-ins. And I mean, gosh, if my clients leave like that little personal note section blank, I'm always like, hey,
Oh yeah.
give me
Oh
some more
yeah.
information before, like
Yeah.
I will send them an email immediately back and be like, hey, I need a little bit more information about your week before I can respond. Or even when people are just like, this was a good week. Like, okay, that's awesome. But like, why was it a good week? Tell me a little bit more about, give me a little bit
Mhm.
more like meat and potatoes. But pictures are really important for me. And I actually had a client this past week and I said, okay, I want to like take this weekend. I want you to try out many different spots in your house for pictures because we were really struggling with like nailing down this lighting. And I was like, I promise you, I'm not just trying to be like an annoying hard ass about this. But she's in prep. And I said, I really want to make sure I can see your physique very diligently so I know when we need to push, when we need to pull, etc. So it took a little bit of work, but we finally found a good spot. But she understood why I needed that from her because at the end of the day, pictures are really important for us as coaches, especially since we're doing things online. So it's like if you're taking your pictures and there's lots of shadows or whatever, like it's only hurting you in the
Right.
long run
Yep.
as a client.
Yeah. Almost the
Yep.
worst thing you can do with pictures is change the location
Yes. Yeah.
because you can look 5 pounds different, leaner
Oh,
in different
for
lighting.
sure.
So
Yep.
as much as it pains me to say this, the harsher the lighting, the better it is for us as coaches. Like
Mhm.
a direct, bright light source, like a ring light, which are I don't even know how much they are. They're $50 now.
$30 on
Yeah.
Amazon. Yeah.
So you set that up, it'll hold your camera for you. Takes no effort. Now, if you have a good window that you can use, but then you got to rely on the sunlight to be
Yep.
up and
Yeah.
but a ring light, because what we as coaches recognize is, yeah, we know the pictures of you are not the most flattering, but when you look good in those pictures, you're ready.
Oh,
Mhm.
yeah.
You're ready. Yeah.
In the same, I think I'll even go as far to say, like, especially if you're in prep, wearing the same thing in your pictures. Like, that's why
Very important.
I don't require all of my clients to go out and get a posing suit. I mean, I think they're wonderful, but even just wearing like the same suit every week, because sometimes even just changing up what you're wearing, like if you're wearing a bikini suit one week and then you're wearing a sports bra the next week with like your underwear, like it can
Yeah.
definitely change the way
The
you.
posing suits are nice because they can make them the same cut as your show suit, which is nice.
Yeah.
Yes. And a little fun fact too, you can actually like something that I will recommend for my clients is if you are wanting to try out like a color, you're maybe you want to do red one season, but you're not quite sure what you're going to look like in red, order a red posing suit because it's a good way to just kind
Yeah.
of see if you like that color on yourself.
And
Yep.
I know I have a lot of my clients that listen to this podcast, and I guarantee when we talk about pictures, they're like, "Oh yeah," because I am anal when it comes to pictures. I want it the same distance away from the camera, the same camera height each time. I want you to fill the whole frame. Like I'm very, very, very specific on this, and that's because I can pull them up and compare them side by side. If the lighting is different,
Well,
location's different,
so we
camera angle's
actually have a
different, you pull it
document
from.
on how to create pictures. So comment below if you guys would like us to just make that public, something we can share. I think that'd be a good idea for anybody in any space, even if you're just
Mhm.
self-coached, is
Yeah.
learning how to evaluate the physique. Yeah.
I
So,
did that yesterday with one of my clients.
yeah.
We were talking about we're in like a recomp slight building phase, and she's lost about 3 pounds since we started, but gained some muscle. And I pulled up pictures from 2 months ago when we started to now and showed to her yesterday, and she was just shocked at the
Right.
difference on there. She was like, I just feel like I need to keep growing my glutes. I'm like, well, yes, we need to keep growing your glutes, but they have been growing. She's like, I don't feel like they've been growing. And I pulled them up. I'm like, you can't tell me these are not considerably bigger in 2 months,
Right.
considerably bigger. But that's because from day one, she listened to me on the pictures and we could compare apples to apples with that.
Right.
Now, if it took her a month to get the pictures right, then we would have had a month of progress to be able to show the difference, not 2 months.
Right.
So this stuff really, really, really does matter. And here's also, you want to talk about like a red flag on things? If a coach never mentions, if you send some horrible pictures and he does not comment back to you, or he or she does
Right.
not get back to you and mention that, that means they ain't looking at them.
That's a good thing. Yeah, I've actually, commented multiple, you notice like sometimes pets will be in the pictures, things
Yeah.
like that. So yeah, make sure your coach is actually paying attention. Send a picture of like Lauralee.
I even, I
Like
even
just
get, I even get real specific with it to where I'll talk about mindset in their pictures. I'm like, hey, let's not look like we're in a hostage video here.
right. Let's
Like,
smile. 5 a.m.
yeah,
coach. I don't care.
I
Smile.
don't care. Start harnessing that. Like harness like that
Right.
inner bad bitch in you. Like seriously, like you need to own these pictures too, because you start doing it now, you're going to be able to do it on stage. And all these little things add up. Another thing, heels. If you're a bikini competitor, wear your heels in your damn check-in pictures. Like that's a big, big thing for me.
It
Really,
makes
really
such a
big.
big difference in the way a physique looks. Like it
Yes.
sounds so silly, but seriously, yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, Evan. If you are a competitor, even in off season, wear your heels, because it does make a big difference.
Yeah. And the truth is, most girls in today's age need a lot of heels to be comfortable. So the more you can even put them on and move them around in your check-in pictures, the better it's going to be, even if for that little small amount of time.
Well, let's touch a little bit on some boundaries in regards to protocols for prep, namely nutrition, cardio,
Mhm.
and drugs. I think that's where we'll end. We got about 10 minutes left here, because that's something where I feel like there are some coaches that maybe don't even have boundaries. They just are willing to do more and more and more. I had a conversation with a young lady this weekend that told me she was on 3 hours of cardio, no carbs, only proteins and oil for fat. It was basically protein powder, lettuce, and oil, and 3 hours of cardio. And that wasn't even the end of prep. That was like a phase where prep just had to stop. But it was because the athlete said no, because this coach has done 4 hours of cardio before, right? And so I'd like to talk a little bit about what my reasoning is and what we can all kind of touch on our points a little bit here. In my mind, there is a point where if the body is not responding to caloric restriction, and listen, I'll be pretty aggressive because there are points, if you're a couple weeks out from the Olympia, you're going to tell me you're not willing to do, you know, whatever it takes to get up there and win. But as a whole, if you're in the middle of prep or you're not in a phase where you should be being aggressive, once we start to get calories below 10 times body weight, I'm not saying I haven't done it before, but if you have a 100-pound competitor on, 1,000 calories, that's when I start to really pay attention. I do have some thresholds with fat. I really, really don't like going below 35, maybe 30 with females, smaller females. Have I? Sure, for very short periods of time or to test things out. Um, I'll never be a no carb person. I believe carbohydrates have value. There is a lot of evidence and a lot of research that shows no carb, low sodium diets have a really negative impact on the female cycle. Um, and so these are things like if you see girls that are having digestive issues, hormonal issues after prepping, look at the protocol. I think there's a direct correlation. I don't have these issues with my clients. Never, ever. But I've also never done zero sodium, zero carb diets. Like, people like, oh, coach, but I'm insulin sensitive. You know what creates insulin sensitivity? Zero carb diets, low sodium diets. So these are protocols are actually the problem. And so when an athlete says to me, I'm willing to do whatever it takes, I will often say, I'm not willing to endanger you or harm you to get this result. There's another show. There's another timeline. Um, and hey, if I lose a client over that, that's fine, but I don't lose sleep over it. So that's kind of like, now as far as cardio goes, listen, I don't love anything over an hour. I've had clients do 2 hours. I've also had clients do an hour in the morning, hour in the evening, and told them they're not allowed to sit down all day. Go to the mall, go for a walk. I really believe activity doesn't have a ton of limits outside of your schedule. Um, and obviously you don't want to get injured. So there's a little more wiggle room there, but I don't believe like there's a big difference if you're going from 1,000 calories in 900 to 800 to 700 to 605. I don't think there's a lot of value there. I think there's more value in just moving more and burning calories that way. Um, and that's just through experience.
Mhm.
So
Agree with
yeah,
that. I agree with that.
There's diminishing returns. There's diminishing returns with
yeah.
all of this stuff. Like what makes sense? What makes sense in what part does the diminishing returns come in? Paul, you mentioned like the insulin sensitivity thing. If you if your blood glucose is messed up and you're in a diet phase, middle to the end of prep, and your blood glucose is high, you're just not in a good place to prep, period.
Right.
I don't know anyone that's remotely lean that has blood glucose issues. Like you shouldn't. That should not be a thing that happens with that. And you can push people hard for short periods of time, right? But there needs to be a plan with that. It cannot be pushed from here till doomsday. And a lot of people do that.
Yeah.
Will do
Well,
that.
it comes down to those response times. I think, you said looking at pictures and getting back to people later. This is where I've had people be like, "Oh, I'm on, I'm on 15 fat, 30 carb and 180 protein." I'm like, "Oh, okay. Well, like, are you guys like getting really after it? What's going on?" No, it's been 6 months. And I'm like, "What? Why?" Oh,
Yeah.
well, I just keep hearing like stick to the plan. Okay, but your show was 3 months ago and you haven't brought food up. Like, so sometimes I do think there's an element of just not paying attention to people.
Yeah, I have. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Lexi.
Oh no, I wasn't going to say anything. Go for it.
No, I have boundaries when it comes to the food side of things for sure. I do pay attention, and it's more earlier on in prep. If I have to have somebody's food very, very low early in prep, and there's no movement going, I have cause for concern there. If we have to push cardio really early in prep to get any sort of movement, I have cause for concern there. When it comes to like the PED side of things, I can typically tell pretty quickly if we're going to have issues with there within the first few months of working with somebody. If they start bringing up a bunch of different things, what about this? What about this? What about this? What about this? I'm like, I understand you're interested in this, but we have all these other avenues we need to get right before any of this stuff is even talked about and considered with this. All of this stuff needs to be in place before this even needs to be talked about. Right. And there's people that like to ask and they like to tinker and they listen to everyone around them in the gym. And those type of clients I will have conversations with about boundaries with it, saying, hey, listen, like I have to know what's going on with this. I have to be able to control certain variables with this. And if we do not control certain variables with this, it's like shooting fish in a barrel. You have no idea what we're doing here. Like it's a needle in a haystack trying to figure out what's going on with that, especially with some of these hormone clinics that they go to with some of the females. They'll go to it and they're like, oh, well, this is low and this is low and this is high and this is high. And they want to put them on 6 different things. Like what? You're 25 years old.
Oh gosh, I know it's crazy. Yeah. I think,
I'm not saying there's not a reason maybe for it, but I think those are rare, right? And when I start hearing and asking questions and I can't get answers from that, it makes me wonder, right? It makes me wonder on things. And I know this because I've worked with good hormone clinics and I've worked with bad hormone clinics. And there is a big difference. Just because they have a doctor next to their name does not mean they know what the
It's the
fuck they're
same thing
talking
as
about.
coaching. Just because they have some successful clients does not mean they're paying attention. There are hormone clinics that are money first.
Yes.
What can we
They're-
sell? How many people can we speak to? And then now what I'm hearing is I've had some clients work with some, hormone therapy clinics and then speak to more of a boutique hormone therapy clinic and get a much better response, much better
Mhm.
result because they're being treated individually
Yeah.
versus like just blanket
right.
treatments. Everybody gets the same thing.
And I think
Yeah.
it's important not to like go off on the tangent of the hormone clinics, but if somebody is prescribing you something or recommending you take X, Y, and Z, it may very well serve a short-term purpose, but I think it's always important to ask about like, hey, what is your long-term plan for me? Like, if you're going to put me on this now, does that mean I have to be on it for the rest of time? Or like, what is our long-term goal here?
Mhm.
But that's a whole other tangent. But I think for me, like, especially with when it comes to boundaries, like that cardio variable is definitely something that generally I don't have to have this conversation one-on-one with a lot of clients because I kind of already know like them as a person, their lifestyle, what they do for work, like what their load already looks like, right? But a lot of times I will have that conversation deeper into prep when we do have to maybe get higher with cardio. I'll ask clients, hey, where are we at with our bandwidth with cardio? Like, is it realistic for you to add in some cardio? Knowing that we're probably going to have to go that route. For example, I have a client right now and she works a very, very demanding job. We're in prep and we've had the discussion of, okay, we're not going to add cardio for like this next month because it's really a really stressful time for her with work. So instead, we're taking from her food and we're actually even adding in just a little bit of HIIT cardio since we can't necessarily add in a ton more steady state. So like having those conversations with clients and knowing their bandwidth for how much cardio they can do, I think is really helpful for me as a coach with knowing, how much I can reach their cardio, what type of cardio we can be doing. Because if you have a client who has 3 kids, they work a full-time job, they may not be able to do 2 hours of cardio. And that's not them being weak, but that's literally they just don't have any more time in the day unless you start to tap into their sleep. And like as a coach, I don't want that either. I don't want a client doing 2 hours of cardio a day if that means they're having to get 5 hours of sleep just to fit that
Right.
in.
Yeah. And I have questionnaires I send out too. I'm like, hey, if we need to push harder, which would you prefer? Lower calories, increase cardio, increase steps, like, or give me all the pain, like give me everything I can handle, whatever. And that's not to question how tough they are. That's, hey, what does your life allow you to do right now? Because we all have different things. Some people can't get in 15,000 steps a day. They can't, like, when do they have time to do that? That's a lot of movement, but they can do 30 minutes on the Stairmaster and rip that out. They can get that in. Is one more optimal than the other? Sure. But I'm a big believer on repeatable, and what's realistic is better than optimal for the vast majority of people.
Yeah. And don't compromise your sleep for more cardio. I think that's a I just had a girl check in today and she's like, because we were talking about, she's not dropping fast enough. And I said, well, your sleep score is a little bit low. Let's focus on a good sleep over the next couple of days. She dropped 1 kilo in 2 days, which is 2.2 pounds, just by getting more sleep. We did not change her plan. I just told her to go to bed and get, proper sleep. Now, was all that body fat loss? Probably not. Probably a little bit of inflammation. But when you see those new lows on the scale, it's more exciting. Had she gotten up an hour earlier to do an extra hour of cardio those days, would she have dropped? Probably not. She probably would still be inflamed. So
Yeah. So a lot of it is what the client is willing to do. And Paul, I learned this from you. I will always say, if I have to push somebody hard, I will push them and say, hey, first of all, I want to make sure you're comfortable with this.
Yeah.
Because if you are uncomfortable with this, I need you to tell me, and that's fine. That's fine. We can talk about some other ways. We can push the show back. There's a bunch of different options we can go here with this. I never want to feel like you have a gun to your head being like, do this or else. I do not want that, because that takes the joy out of any of this, right? Any of this. And I can tell you, Paul, I don't think I've ever had somebody come back and say no.
I definitely have had people be like, oh, I can't, this is what I can do.
Oh, well, yeah, that. But like, as far
Yeah.
as like, are you comfortable with the process, like the
Oh,
food being
no.
where it is,
If
for the
anything,
cardio where it is? Yeah.
I mean, when I see some of the protocols that these other coaches are doing, I'm like, geez, compared to them, I'm mild. But so, I have adopted more aggressive approaches for short periods of time because I'm like, okay, well, let's just see if this works. And sometimes it does work. The difference is I'm paying attention and I'm not letting check-ins, even if I'm being very aggressive, I'm not even waiting a full week. It might be a 48-hour, 72 hours. Let's check back.
I think that's important. And that's a boundary like I have as a coach too, is the more aggressive we get and generally deeper into prep, like we are doing a lot more frequent touching base, even if it isn't just like, maybe it's not a check-in, maybe it's just me texting them saying, hey, how are we doing today? How are you feeling? Just want to see how you're doing. Like the more aggressive we get, generally, the more we want to stay on top of that communication.
100%.
One more thing I wanted to bring up about like coaching boundaries with it. I also kind of go the opposite direction. I have one client that I work with that set a goal I won't talk about what it is, but she set a very firm goal in here, and we didn't have a ton of time to get there. And I told her, I was like, okay, yeah, we could do that. We're going to have to push to get there a little bit, but sure, we can get there. It's not out of bounds or impossible to do that. But her food is on the lower side of thing. And if I get above like 30 minutes of cardio with her, it's like, I can't get out of bed. I'm so exhausted. I'm so tired. I can't do anything. I can't do my life. I'm like, that's fine. Then we need to pick a different goal, because it is literally going to be impossible for us to get here if you cannot do over 30 minutes of cardio. If you can't do that, that's totally fine. But we need to change our goal here.
Yeah.
And
yeah. If you have someone struggling and they're on like 2,500 calories and 15 minutes of cardio, and they're like, I don't know, coach, I'm exhausted, I'm starving. And I'm like, we've got a long way to go.
we got a
Like
long way to go.
maybe they just need to learn how to be a little bit hungry sometimes, but yeah.
I think toughness plays a little bit of role in sometimes with this. And look, here's the deal. A lot of people have never pushed themselves physically. They haven't, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's the one
And when
difference that I know as an athlete, that I push myself way harder in sports than I ever have in prep.
Yeah.
So it's a different, it's almost enjoyable prep, because you're like, oh, I get that sense of like, I'm, challenging myself.
Yeah.
Let's not drag this out any longer. I think that's good right now for boundaries. I would like you to comment below, if you're still listening, and just mention the boundary that you were found most relatable today, or that we didn't cover, and maybe we'll cover it in the next one, right? So, this podcast is very much a conversation for competitors, about competitors, and with competitors, and a lot of it's inspired by our own experiences as coaches and competitors, but we'd love to just hear from you guys, especially if you're still listening at the end. You're the real MVPs.
And if you're still listening, I'm going to treat you guys with my little motto, and I can't take credit for this, but on the topic of boundaries, be a bitch, which stands for boundaries I thoughtfully and confidently hold. So I'll leave you with that. That's
I like that.
That's my little motto, my little acronym.
I like that.
Be
Yeah.
a bitch. That's pretty bold for you, Lexi. I feel like you should wear that shirt at the Arnold.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I'd have to
We'll
get
even get little dots for after each letter, so they don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would get a lot of people coming up and being like, what? But yeah, that's my little motto. I like it. I didn't make it up. I heard it somewhere, so I can't take credit for
I
it.
like it. Boundaries I thoughtfully hold clear.
Yeah. If you put that on a shirt and on a backpack, spell that out, I bet the bazillion people would buy that.
Oh gosh, now I got to go like buy that, like not that LLC, but like I got to trademark that now so nobody takes that idea. I like that.
That's a good one. Yeah.
All right, you got a week till the podcast comes out.
Oh, yes. All right, guys. Well, thanks for listening to us.
Talk tomorrow.
Appreciate it.
And